All right. Hey, we're ready to go? Why don't we start with Jivan?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So Jivan is calling in from Taos, New Mexico, and this is fun. I think it's really fun talking to you, especially Jivan. And I want to tell you all, go to the Coors westernart.com, and I believe we've linked to some of your videos on your website or videos. Llewellyn Gallery has videos. You are the social media, you have this nailed down. And I think it's perfect the way you do this, because you are a plein air painter in extraordinary proportions.
Yeah.
And I can describe this, and you can maybe show us this crazy palette you have. But when you see when you see your videos, like you're basically painting out of a horse trough.
Yeah, pretty much here. I can walk over slowly. I hope I won't nauseate anybody watching. But so here's my palette in the studio. This is the same as I use on location, and they are. Pretty much just like 20 by 40 inch plastic storage bins that you would put under a bed, and they roll into the back of my truck. And so I have, usually in my truck, I have two surfaces, bottom and top. And then I mix my paint on I have a totally different carrier for all my paint. The actual, stuff I lay out is over here and all in the back of the truck. So that's just, I don't know. I think most of the time people use this to mix and also lay their color out, but this is just where I put my color, and then those are the mixing palettes.
Amazing.
Yep.
So, hey, Greg Bruff, you asked about increasing the volume. That would be on your computer end, I believe. Hey, panelists, let's all just really speak up.
You got it.
Yeah, okay. So, Jivan, and what I really want to stress here is, thanks, is this painting outside. And I have actually been out on location with an artist who was painting on I think he was using like a 40 by 40 canvas. Mm-hmm. And at one point, the wind kicked up, and that thing was like a wind sail. Yeah. I had like a 72-inch piece almost fly off in Taos Gorge at one point, and I'm not kidding. I was like hanging over with a big pinky, and it was flying off by my pinky, and ended up saving it. But yeah, it happens sometimes. They're like sails. Yeah. So you know what? Will you talk more about that? And then I really want to talk about the work that you have in the show, especially the one behind you. But tell us some of your adventures of painting out on location.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a nutty thing to do. I mean, so there are days where I'll wonder why I choose to make art that, on location with the inconvenience of it. But it's kind of like, it's all about getting out in the elements and being immersed in the place. And so any particular weather that you've ever driven in that's been awful, I'm out painting in. So this piece was like a beautiful fall day. It was big and difficult to paint, but it was a beautiful fall day. But the other large piece over here that I have in the show, there are a few others in the studio I can talk about too, but this particular one, this is like 48 by 84 inches, and that storm blew in on top of me while I was painting. And so, it came first, the clouds developed and, on top of me, and it was not so stormy. And then this whole dark cloud system just started pulling across the valley. And by the time I was, I had to pack up, the whole valley had blown into a dust storm, and I could barely see the mountains. Just before or after this piece, I forget, in this series of work, this location is a homeward series I had a piece, blow my entire canopy off the back of the truck. Oof, sorry, my tripod is a little funky today. My entire canopy blew off the back of my truck and broke. And I had it weighted down with like 100 pounds. So it was like a tremendous outflow from a thunderstorm, and it blew the entire painting I'd been painting off too, and broke the piece. And now it's in my personal collection because it's broken. But And I loved the painting so much that I kept it. But, it depends on the day. In the middle of the winter, the deep snow, be out in the foot of snow, it's all year round, and that's exciting. But the goal, I guess, is that being in those elements kind of forces adaptation all the time. And therefore the process of painting becomes something, it's not so much about the image even at that point, but about the feeling of the place and then what happens because of the place. And that's why I do it, because it keeps things lively. I never know what's going to happen. I can't control what's going to happen. And therefore it's this adaptation to nature, and nature kind of shapes the paintings that way rather than my mentation, which I don't personally seem to paint as well out of my own inner narrative as much as I do in relationship to what nature is kind of bringing to the table.
You know what? We're going to use that as our theme. And this has been so interesting in these talks, that there is a thread that just comes up kind of quickly with the combination of artists. And the combination of artists is really pretty random. You guys picked a day that works for you. Now, you and David Grossmann have been friends for a very long time. And so I'm thinking maybe you guys got together on this, and then, we brought Jill in. But this is something I really want to talk about, is painting on location and the psychology of that versus David Grossmann. You paint on location as well, but you do a lot of studio work. And Jill, you do on location too, but obviously you do a lot of studio work too. And I would say maybe, but you two correct me when we get to you in a few minutes, that David and Jill, you're doing more studio work, whereas Jivan, you are out on location. And so you're reacting to elements. So would you kind of, I want to ask you how and why you have really landed on this plein air large. Why is this the way you work?
I feel like some of that's just the evolving, one step leads to another, and it's not some intentional thing where I set out to do this. I didn't set out to be an artist, when I went to school at all. So it's all a bit of a surprise, but I'd say what seems to appeal to me in the process is, again, kind of how I can, my favorite art is kind of abstract art, like expressionists and action painters who are, throwing stuff at the canvas and doing whatever they could to kind of involve their entire body. And the whole process became a part of the point. And I think in terms of my sentiment while painting, that appeals to me. And yet I also have a real affinity for the wild world beyond human habitation, or at least in conjunction with it. And so in hindsight, it kind of makes sense that I would land on landscape painting. What has surprised me is how much the place means to me in images. I would have thought maybe I would go in the landscape and do something totally abstracted based on the feelings of the spot, but image retains a real power for me. And I think that's why I keep on going to specific locations. And then over time, the each day and the recognizable storm of this spot, or this famous tree that I painted over there, or, this large monument piece is the biggest one I've done on location. And all of them arise out of, I guess it's just the affinity for being in nature in a specific place, which leads to imagery, then leads to also still wanting to convey the potency of the energy. And so going large at scale on location was an outgrowth of, can I do this? I want to try just to see. And then, well, what's the value of that artistically? What does that convey for an audience? And what am I then sharing? And so for me, the scale ended up being another way to push beyond my habituation, so that I don't have time to really get in too many ruts. I could just every day is new weather and new variables. I don't know what panels I'll have in the back of my truck. I don't know, kind of by design, I have a set of sizes that fit together well, but I never quite know what the random set is that's in the back of my truck that I can piece together. So on this particular day, I had 60 by 40 inch panels. And so there are 4 of them in this big painting, and they fit together. On the day of the tree, I didn't have 60 by 40 inch panels. I had a whole, pastiche of random sizes. And so as I pieced together the day and on location, watching the tree and realizing that I really cared about over here, and I was really paying a lot of attention here and there, but I didn't remember anything about the blank spaces, so I didn't paint the blank spaces. And so the panels grew out kind of as my attention grew out, and the sizes of the panels corresponded to, well, what I pulled out of the back of the truck. All that kind of introduced variation, I guess, is part of what's led to this mix of scale. Because sometimes I paint very small. It's not that I don't like small, but the sort of stretch between large and small scale seems to be what keeps things fresh and keeps on testing what I can do. Sometimes I fail because it's, hard to paint big and doesn't always succeed, and other times it does.
So let me ask you this, which I think is something that, unless you actually have tried to paint outside on location, maybe you, like normal people, wouldn't really think about this, but the sun is constantly in motion. I mean, it's not just the wind, but the sun is constantly in motion. So the shadows that you see in a painting, those are constantly moving. So as you're going outside, you have to make a lot of decisions rather quickly, and then you're kind of committed, right?
Yep.
And especially that large. So how do you do, like, how does that happen? And what I'm really kind of, when we're talking with artists about this, like, I don't want to get too far into the weeds on it, but what I'm wondering about you is, like, did you react just emotionally, spontaneously to a site and then start going for it? Are you doing little sketches? Is it a place you go back to over and over? Like, how does that all come together?
Yeah, it's all of it together. I mean, there's strategy to like you're saying, there are horizons of time where things are possible, and depending on the weather of the day, that changes. If it's a thunderstorm in the morning in New Mexico, they blow up huge, and then by 2 p.m, they're spreading out to the east, and that's what they do. And so I have a 2-hour chunk of vertical thunderstorms, and then I have a 4-hour chunk of stretching out into darkness and total, downpour in the monsoon season, if there is one. And if it's a sunny day, like say with that tree, I was under its canopy, and the shadow moved along the day, but the dynamics of the shadow didn't really change until the extremes of day, right? Like in morning, it would have had a totally different palette, but in the midday hour, 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock basically have the same palette. So the only question is where the shadow is at that time, not the nature of the shadow. Whereas at the extremes of day, it's the nature of the shadows themselves change so dramatically that usually if I'm doing a giant sunset painting, I have to go back multiple days because the window of time that the palette is relatable and coherent is much narrower. That's why, Monet would say, he has like 15 minutes to paint one chunk of light, and then it's totally different at the end of that increment, and it's another kind of light. I very much relate to that at the extremes of day. In the middle of the day, it's more forgiving in terms of time. Like with this painting of the river here, this was a midday piece. It was insanity sort of producing in my experience because the shadows changed so much and the dynamics between shadow areas and light areas in the forest changed, but the color of the shadows didn't change a huge amount. And so there's kind of a balance between the nature of different days and where the center point of my process is on any given day in terms of where I stick to. I paint a thunderstorm, it doesn't always look like one thing, and yet there's one image on my painting. And so within the center point of my process, there are patterns that kind of feed in and allow me to collage moments. So that's, part of it's like the dynamism of change, kind of stuck into one moment of the painting, but it's a collage over time.
So, okay, that makes sense. And I think that's possible to do. Like, you're making it sound easier than I think it really is. But I think as an artist, you understand the colors and you understand the harmony of colors to keep all that straight in your head.
Sure.
Yeah. So, okay, 2 questions. And I usually don't ask artists this, how long does it take you? But in your case, I think, because you have to go out multiple times, right?
Sometimes, yeah. It depends on the piece. Like this piece was one afternoon on location and then back in the studio another day. This tree, the large one here, took about 6 months, but not because of painting. It was because of the 4 months I couldn't decide if I was going to destroy it or not because I hadn't finished it and something was really bothering me about it. I liked some of the panels and I thought maybe I would split it up and just frame separate panels, though that wasn't the idea for the piece. This took 4 months to figure out composition.
Why were you going to destroy that?
Because I hadn't figured out, it was like destroy in the sense of pull it apart and frame them separately rather than try to keep the whole thing, conceptually related. And I couldn't figure out if compositionally it was becoming a little bit of a artifice or some other almost gimmick, or if it was still relating to the experience of being in the place. I mean, the whole goal is what is attention doing on it at a place? And like when I'm looking at a tree, I don't see all the branches, which is why there are blank spots in this work, because I didn't notice everything. And it actually isn't how I look. I would have to fabricate what happened between these spots to actually be accurate, or go back over the course of a month and specifically paint other locations, which is fun. But I liked the idea of being in this place on a day and letting it all stretch out. The challenge was balancing that whole time and then like conveying in a fractured image, how do you have a sense of completeness? And it was a real challenging problem. So this was like a day on location to get color and form blocked in, and then 4 months to figure out what was bothering me with it in the studio, and then another day in the studio to finish out panels. I added the bottom 2 panels later on. That was what I realized was bothering me, because the piece at one point was basically just here and it felt too truncated. But like other paintings.
You know what? Well, since you're on that topic, Ginny Gulikowski is asking, and I think this is really fits in really well with what you're saying. Does he have the connecting panels next to each other as he paints? And so
yeah, I like that question. It depends on the piece and what happens. I have another piece I did at this location looking the opposite direction, where I clamped them all together, but I didn't paint a continuous image. Even so, I just actually, again, painted where my attention was and left everything else out. And so that piece actually overlaps. If you try to hang it continuously, you would have a painting stacked on top of each other. This piece, I had some of them clamped together, yes, and then other ones I was literally holding in my hand painting, like this small, blue sky one up there, or up the other ones up high there. I was holding them in my hands, painting them, and so it wasn't continuous or clamped together in that way. But the center core here, these ones I had clamped together and on the ground. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I have a question I end these talks with. So I'm coming back to you, Jivan. So just stay put. And the question is really is so for all of you to kind of think about it, is your training and how you got from A to Z, like how you're here today. But we're going to talk about like that at the end. And so, you know what? I am going to hop over to Jill Soukup.
All right.
Thanks, Jivan. We'll be back.
Yeah, of course.
And if you have questions, people listening in, please type in some questions for us. Hi, Jill. You have to actually say hi.
Hi. So I got my phone here and my computer here. So
yeah. So it's activated by your voice. And so it's so funny because artists always do that. They wave at me and I'm like, nope, like you're not on the screen yet. Jill, so good to see you. So Jill has been a featured artist in the show, and you're just always a popular artist with us. And you've been in the show, I want to say 14, 15. Does that sound about right?
I think since 2009. So what's the math on that?
Yeah. Okay. Really? That's it? 11 years? 12? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. 12 years. Yeah. So, so Jill, and I cannot wait. Okay. At the end, we're going to talk about how you evolved into what you're doing now, because I think it's really fun and people will like that story of where you sort of earned your chops. But I really want to talk about these big paintings because your work now, and if people know your work, they also know you paint a lot of cityscapes. and you're not limited to horses and buffalo and things like that. Certainly what we generally show of your work at the Coors show is more of that, which I know you love. And you paint like really big scaled work. So I want you to talk about that because I think scale is such a personal choice with artists, and why they paint large like that and spread out. Because I know some artists who generally paint fairly small, and it works for them. And other artists, like Jivan, I mean, these are huge canvases and you just spread out on them, but they also have some really interesting challenges for artists. So let's talk about scale.
Okay. Well, for me, with the large animals, it really comes down simply to trying to bring a life-size animal into your home. And it really basically goes back to just my childhood desire of having my own horse. So really that's what it comes down to for me in regards to the animal paintings.
And I always thought you had a horse growing up. And then I remember one day you said, no, I always wanted one. And that's why I paint them.
Yep. It was the next best thing. I felt like I was physically touching them just through the act of drawing and sometimes sculpting them.
Wow. So you were, as a kid, were you drawing and horses just as a kid? That was a big thing for you.
Yeah, horses is all I drew as a kid.
Really?
Yeah.
And your parents just never got the hint?
Oh, they got the hint and then some. It just didn't work in, the dynamics of life and our family.
Yeah. It's a big commitment. It's a lot more to poop to scoop, let's say. Hey, so talk about the buffalo behind you. Tell us about that. Tell us about the what inspired you. And now you're actually you're working from a series of photos and then kind of putting them away and really just going on your intuition and emotion and everything you know about painting, right?
Yeah, very much so with the bison pieces. And actually, it's great to be paired with Jivan and David, landscape painters, because there's actually an element of landscape, particularly in the bison pieces. So I can talk about that if you
talk about it. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Let's see. So, sorry, what was the original question?
Tell me about, because you've done a number of bison paintings and you do them in all different kinds of weather, and they seem like it's something that seems to inspire you. And I'm wondering what it is about buffalo that inspires you.
Yeah, great. Okay, great. Thanks. You got me back on track. So largely it's their texture, especially when they've got I call it spring shag. I think I call it bolting. But so for me, it's a very organic and abstract quality about an animal. And as of late, in the last couple of years, I've been really fascinated with rocks, which brings me back to the landscaping, or landscape paintings. So I've actually been sketching and drawing rocks plein air, and then what I'm learning and discovering through the rocks, I'm actually applying to the bison. Horse pieces as well, but the bison are in particular extremely more connected to the formations and shapes I see in rocks. So in fact, I had Brent, my husband, grab my little notebook because I've been sneaking out a couple times a month just to do some rock sketches. See if I can find something I worked on this week here. So just
you have to come all the way close up to the camera. Yeah, so we can see it. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
So drawings like these actually are influencing paintings like these. So for example, if you just were to come in closer, you'll see that there's a real subtle line work and just the breakdown of the shapes that when I'm working on them is more intuitive, and I'm pulling back from these exercises I'm doing from studying the rocks. So I will start from a photo reference. I will do a sketch, which I will grab. So here's the sketch. And this actually is probably more closely related to the rock drawings that I do. And here you can really see the breakdown of the shapes and kind of that rock quality. So once I get the painting mostly built out, the last few steps are to completely work from intuition and memory, I suppose, and apply those qualities to the bison painting.
And you're really kind of getting these beautiful color harmonies that I think if you're not a painter, you know, maybe you don't really think about it, but there's something so pleasing about the warm and the cool together, the, you know, sort of the coppery or the, you know, the tonal color with the, you know, the gray blue colors and things like that. It's really harmonious. And that's more of an intuitive process.
Well, yes and no. Again, I'll go back and do the rocks in color because the colors in there are phenomenal as well. But also in terms of color, I actually rely quite a bit on color theory. So you talked about warms and cools and that sort of thing. And actually that's what these are for. You'll see that they're all pretty similar. But the one I relied on the most was this one here. And it was really based off of, you'll see there's some greens in there and some purples and some oranges. So it's really based off of the color theory and the triad of the secondary colors on the color wheel. Hope I'm not getting too in the weeds.
That's fun. No, Google that, people. Google that. You're going to sound super smart at a cocktail party when we can go back to them.
So so color very much for me, because I work so much in the studio and less from life, learning about color and light from life, I really rely quite a bit on color theories. So, which is, you know, same, it's color and light and life are in color theory as well, but it takes it into more of a conceptual perspective instead of just drawing or painting what you see.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. So Greg Bruff has a question, and this was what I was going to ask too, or a similar thing is, his question is, Jill, do you use layers of gesso to create texture in your paintings, back painting, so to speak? And when you're answering that question, could you bring could your husband bring that camera right up there? Or whoever's helping you, sorry, I didn't mean to assume.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And can we kind of get a little side view, almost like you're skimming across the canvas, so we can really see that texture that we would get to see in person?
Yeah.
Can we kind of do that? Because you do get some good texture in that work. Yeah. So are you using layers of gesso, or is it paint layers building up?
It's just paint, yeah. But one of the things I'm exploring is texture. And one of the aspects of that is the different levels of paint as it's drawing. So when the paint's halfway dry, maybe I get different effects from it than I would if it was wet on wet. Same thing after the paint dries, then there's several things I'm exploring with wet paint on the dry paint. And again, different levels at that point as it's drying. So just multiple levels of texture just with the paint.
Yeah, so would you also talk to us? Susan Williamson is asking, along with the gesso question, what surface and prep do you prefer?
Well, on the large ones, you have to use a stretched canvas just in terms of the integrity and support of the canvas and the paint. But on the smaller ones, it's just canvas mounted onto gator board. I don't know if you can, here, I'll bring this one down. You can see the gator board.
Yep.
And no, I don't do any prep other than to the canvas. I don't apply any extra gesso or any other kind of medium. It's just paint.
Wonderful. Would you talk about then, Jill, can we go into and take a look at the other paintings in the show? And
Oh, sure.
yeah, and what you're going to have for us.
This is it all right here. So we've got a total of 4.
Okay, let's talk about them. What do you got for us?
Oh, well, we've got everything is from Chico Basin and Zapata Ranch. They're both under the head of ranch lands, which we'll come back to at the end when you ask about our journeys. So the bison, Zapata, and that's Chico.
And can we go right up to those paintings?
Sure.
Some of them, and just, I'd love to know. Okay, so this with the horses.
Sorry, hold on one second. Let's do this. All right, sorry.
Okay, good. So just pick up one of the horse paintings and I'd love to know, because I think, we were really talking about color, and I feel like color is a big, important part of your work and that color theory that you know really well. And so when you're painting horses like this one, that's, I think, to your right, my left. Yeah. Let's take a look at that one, because you've got this gorgeous white horse with so much color. Like I'm seeing pinks and purples and blues and all kinds of things in, not only in the shadows, but in the horse. And then you've got these other horses that are to a lesser degree sort of fading into the background. How are you putting these together, and what is inspiring you about like this particular gesture of the horse or things like that?
Sure. So it really comes down for me to abstract qualities, the abstract structure that lies underneath the painting. So back to the sketches. And you'll notice actually that the image is flipped. The horse in the painting is going this way, and then my studies are going the other direction. That was actually a bit of an accident, but.
Can we bring the studies closer?
Sure, yeah.
Yep, awesome.
Well, I guess the very early inspiration are the horses, and just spending time with them and being around them, just the intuitive and I guess spiritual aspect of being around them is part of the inspiration. And then when it gets into the actual art production, so much of what I do comes down to the structure of the painting. So that really comes down to just the basic black and white structure of the underlying painting. So that's a huge part of what I'm exploring, really, is just structure and dark and light pattern. And then from there, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with color. So you'll see you've got 3 different color ideas. One is more monochromatic. One is really a high key, which means that you don't have any real dark values, like a real dark black. You'll see the chroma is really high, really bright and colorful colors. And then this is the one I ended up with. Honestly, in part, this is something I don't do a lot of, and I wasn't quite sure I could pull it off large. But I really like this one too, because it's really, if you look at complementary colors, kind of a purple blue and a yellow orange. And I liked the dull colors pushing forward the bright colors of the horse, and trying to push the chroma in the horse and dull everything around the horse down a little bit. So there we go.
So when you are painting, because you also paint out on location, are you kind of doing sketching for reference, or completing paintings, or is that?
Mostly I'm just observing the horses, and I'm trying to understand their anatomy and the way they move. That's with just sketches, black and white, and then I'll bring my paints out to study their color from life and the real subtle changes and shifts within the coat of the horse.
But then mostly everything, all paintings are really done in your studio.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll do color studies, but yeah, they're just that. They're just studies.
Yeah,
For
wonderful.
learning.
Okay, so thank you, Jill. Do not go anywhere. I know you're shy and you're just like really ready to bolt out the door, aren't you? Don't go anywhere. So we're going to head over to David Grossman, and I'm coming back to you, and I'm coming back to Jivan. So, David, hello.
Hello. Thank you, Rose.
Good to see you. So, for those of you who are really familiar with the Coors show, maybe you'll remember when David first came in the show. Was that like 6, 7 years ago?
Yeah, either 6 or 7.
Yeah. So David is, yeah, like I love this story. So David reached out to me and no, you came on one of my tours through the gallery.
I did, yeah.
And then at the end of the first tour you came on, you said, "Hey, I'm an artist and I'm wondering if I could show you my paintings." And I said, "Absolutely, I'd love to see them." And a whole year went by, and you came on another one of my tours, and you said, "Okay, I'm ready to show you my paintings." And then we set up a time. But I think that's one of my favorite stories, because I think that, to me, in my mind, is you. You are so patient and willing to just put the work in and the time in, and you're not going to rush and you're not going to panic. You're just really patient and serene, and you're like my mirror, because I'm like, "Let's do it now. Oh, that sounds great," and and you're like, "Let's just let it breathe." So I really want to talk to you about the work, because when you're not around, so I'll let you know this, when I'm showing people your work in the gallery, when we can do that, I always say, stand here, look at this work, breathe, and you've just met David. He is this quiet, serene, very gentle spirit, and you've just met him in his work, And so I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the work, but I want to talk about how you put you into the work. And let me say this isn't discounting Jill or Jivan or any other artist in the Coors show, because you are all in the Coors show, because I feel like you are doing that already. So, but David, because the question is yours, would you talk about this work and your inspiration, how you put your feeling into the work?
Wow, thank you. I feel like I should let you talk about it instead. You do that so well, but thank you. And I think that feeling of serenity is really what I hope to capture in my work. Partly because that's not usually where my mind is. Maybe it looks like that on the outside, but I think on the inside, I'm just as distracted and preoccupied as the rest of us. And what I hope to capture in my work are some of those moments of serenity. And hopefully, we all have so many distractions that we live with. And I think there's something really wonderful in art that can allow us those opportunities to step back from some of that noise, and hopefully to step into a space that is more contemplative. And just like Jill and Jivan were, as they were explaining their process, kind of that intuitive part of our minds that can take over as artists, and hopefully that can allow other people to step in with their intuitions and to have more of that connected experience. So I guess my process of how these come together, I do paint outdoors quite a bit. So Jivan and I have painted together a few times. And
it must be fun to watch. Like Jivan paint flying everywhere, and you with these small,
Exactly, yeah. Jivan's working on his 10-foot canvas, and here I am with my little 6x8-inch panel, and he's dancing around, and I'm just very quietly there working away. But so I have 3 small paintings that will be in the show. So these I painted outdoors. This was just this past autumn when the aspens were beautiful as they are every year.
Can you bring that, would you bring that right up? Yeah, I want to show people those, just the brush strokes and yeah, so you can see all those little, and what I love about this is when you see these little bits of paint next to each other.
Yeah. So with a painting like this, just like Jivan was saying, the light, and you were saying too, the light changes so fast that I really have to work more from that intuitive space of really trying to capture whatever emotion I'm feeling in that space at the time before it's gone. And then when I'm back in my studio, I have a lot more time to kind of process those feelings. And what I'm hoping to do with my larger pieces is to kind of overlap that, the reality and also my imagination and memory of places. So like this painting with the deer, it's not a specific place, but it's a lot more built out of those memories of places where I've painted or been, and trying to convey some of that sense of what is passing so quickly and trying to hang on to it.
Would you talk about the deer in your paintings? Because when they show up, like wildlife artists, the deer is the thing and the landscape is the setting. But with you as a landscape painter, the deer is doing something else. And I don't even want to call it an element in the painting. It's something more than that in the painting. Would you talk about when wildlife shows up with the landscape? What's that feeling? What's that essence there?
Yeah, that's really well said. For me, when I'm out in the woods, I often see deer, and even in our backyard, I see them frequently. And I'm always amazed at the sense of quiet and mystery that they carry. And so to me, they've become really symbolic of that sense of mystery of the forest. So when I paint them, it's kind of an embodiment of that feeling of silence. And I'll go closer here. I did also post a couple of close-ups on the website so you can see hopefully some more of the textures, but.
Oh, good. And Paul Primack is typed, this is lovely. Rose, his deer seem to have a spiritual quality. Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and full disclosure, I have one of your paintings with deer in it. And what's funny is people come over and I've actually had people say, either, if you don't want that painting, and I'm like, what, who are you? Or they say, if you turn your back, I would run out the door with that painting. So it's really fun. It does something to people. It really does. The deer and how it is in the landscape like that is really wonderful. Okay, so Cece Cunningham is asking, please spend more time on the close-up shots. So I'm wondering if we could just, I don't know.
Go back.
Yeah, okay, good. Good.
And a lot of what I do is building textures, which is, as you know, Rose, really hard to show on a computer screen. But so I wish I could show you these in a better way. But the textures and transitions of color are really important to me while I'm working.
It's gorgeous. So, Jodelle, if you change your view to gallery view, you'll be able to see everybody on your screen, and I'm trying to stop talking and have the artist talk so you can get in there. So I do apologize for that, because it does switch to speaker view. So you're seeing me right now, and I know you want to see the art. So David, would you talk about your other two paintings behind you? And I'm going to zip it and let's get close to them.
Yeah, I'll bring this one closer. Okay. So this one is inspired by an actual place. I live in Grand Junction in Western Colorado. And so the city, which you can kind of see the city lights maybe down at the bottom. The city is in a valley, and on one side of the valley is this beautiful flat top mountain, the Grand Mesa. So this painting was inspired by the first light of sunrise hitting the clouds. And it was kind of a windy morning. So I wanted to capture that sense of the first light and that the motion of the wind and kind of this, just that sense of flowing space is what I hope to capture. So you can kind of see the crescent moon is up here. It's a little hard to see on the screen, but there it is.
And you know, this is, I was just thinking this, Paul Primack also said it, there's a sense of Van Gogh with the way you did your flow of brushwork.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought of Van Gogh when I was painting this, and just the sense of urgency that I see in his paintings was something that maybe I drew on a little bit, although this is maybe less spontaneous than what he would have done.
So it's gorgeous. I love it. And it seems like you just keep stretching and going in more directions with your work. So let's look at that other one. And then I've got a couple comments while you grab that. Tammy says, I saw your first show at your gallery here in Jackson, smitten right away. Your color palette has changed quite a bit since that first show. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I that's something that people ask me about. And it was never a conscious decision that my older work tended to be much more tonal, fewer colors. And I think maybe some of it is just the amount of time I spent painting outdoors and trying to capture color that I'm seeing has slowly seeped its way into my studio process as well. And it's also just really fun to experiment with different color combinations.
You know, and I want to kind of get to that, but first I want to read you these comments as well. For David, love the feeling of serenity in his works. I have 3 works, and his October in the Gothic Valley is a wonderful contrast because it's majestic. A lot of people, thank you. Can you believe it's like 12:50? So I'm going to circle back around to everybody, but David, since you're here, I want to ask you about how you came to this place as far as training. But I also want to mention too that your parents were missionaries and you grew up in South America, right?
That's right, yeah.
And then came back to Pueblo, and you went to school at a fine art academy in Boulder that is now defunct. And you also studied some with Jay Moore. But and why I'm saying that color question is interesting to me is because I'm also thinking that South America, coming back to Pueblo, the end of your high school years?
I was 14.
So
yeah, 15.
So heading into high school and then studying in Boulder, so there's this really amazing kind of shift in atmosphere. And so artistically, what is kind of coming into your life. But I wonder if you could talk about that, when you were going through that painting academy to now, and talk about how you got here.
Yeah, well, it's been a bit of a winding road. I've always loved to draw. And so for as far back as I can remember, I wanted to be an artist. But figuring out what that would mean for me took a long time to figure out. So after I studied at the Art Academy in Boulder, which was where I first started painting outdoors from life, and that's really when I love being outdoors and I love painting, and when the two came together, I was hooked. So that really solidified my trajectory as far as what I wanted to focus on with my art. And then I studied with Jay Moore, like you said, and he's on the show this year too. And his confidence in me was really a turning point for me as an artist, because until then, I didn't know professional artists. I didn't have anyone who had experienced what it meant to make a living as an artist tell me that I could do this. So to hear that from him made a huge difference for me. And so then after that, after studying with Jay and really studying with him, it was all based on how to make a living as an artist, very practical. It wasn't technique. He encouraged me to develop my own voice. And that's why it took me so long with you, Rose, was I was still figuring out what that voice might be. And then when you came along and you encouraged me, that was really another turning point for me as an artist. And I'm always grateful for you and for the Coors community that's been so supportive of me in my journey.
Well, thanks, David. You know what? It's just, the feeling is so mutual, because as a curator, I don't paint. I don't paint for a reason. It gives me a headache. But I just so admire, and you talked about voice, David, and I'll tell you, I really don't paint because I don't have an original voice with a paintbrush in my hands. My voice is elsewhere. And so I think what I hope people listening to these conversations can really get out of by hearing your physical voices and seeing it with the work is that this notion of voice is really personal, and to be an artist versus what Wayne Thiebaud calls an art world employee, where you're making stuff for a market, and it doesn't have to, whatever it is. But these talks and the people that you're all being introduced to, David and Jill and Jivan, this is, akin to a calling. And this is your voice, and your paintings and your work is representing you, whether you're there to talk about it or not. So David, so beautifully put. Thank you. Jill, Jill studied art. You have to say hi again.
Hi.
Okay. Now we have Jill back. You're just so happy to be in the spotlight, aren't you? No, that'd be a no. So Jill, you studied art. Did you study at CU?
I went to CSU.
CSU. And out of college, you worked for the Museum of Science and Nature, right?
Yep.
Yeah, go Rams. So will you talk about your journey to where you are today?
Okay. Well, actually, I can completely relate with David. Like him, since I was a child, I knew I wanted to be an artist. And yet it was still, even though I knew I wanted that, which is, I feel, a huge blessing to know so young what you want to do, it was still a windy road for me as well. There's so many ways to be creative and be an artist. I went to CSU for a Bachelor in Fine Art. I contemplated illustration, biomedical design, sculpture, photography, and eventually ended up in graphic design. And here I am now as a painter. But even all through that, even once I decided I wanted to paint, what do I want to paint? So when I first started, I was doing a lot of architectural and multiple different subjects. And in 2003, I was invited to Ranch Lands, Chico Basin in Zapata. They have an artist gathering. And I continued to come every year to their artist gatherings. And so gradually, I was doing more and more horses and Western themed art. And voila, that landed me in the Coors show. And then everything really exploded. And Western art and horses really seemed to be where I am now.
Yeah, wow. And you also you studied with some folks here in Colorado too that are pretty well known. Kwong, I think, was Kwong Ho, who's also in the show. We'll be hearing from Kwong soon. And so when you worked with the Museum of Nature and Science, what was your job with them? And I bring this up because there are some really famous artists from the turn of the century, the early 1900s, who actually worked for the Museum of Nature and Science, painting backdrops and working on sculptural installations. Kent Olberg did a bunch of work with them. And so it's really an interesting, I think, path to, a rock to jump on to get to the next one. So what did you do with them?
My primary job was a graphic designer, but it was such an amazing place to work because I worked in the exhibits department. So I was working with other disciplines of fine arts, three-dimensional design, the spatial quality of an exhibit. I did get to work with Kent Pendleton, who was the muralist there at the time, and actually have one of the trees in the prehistoric journey. It's the one with the Triceratops skull in the water. Actually, there's this one big tree trunk that kind of leans over. I did that tree trunk. And I did one other little portion. But what was so great about being at the museum was just that there are all these creative people and working together to bring an exhibit together and being able to dip my toes into other disciplines other than just graphic design, like the illustration. I did some illustration, got to do a beer label for the Wind Creek Brewery, and drew an insect on it. And of course, there was the mural with Kent, and just many other opportunities there. So yeah, it was an amazing experience.
Wow, perfect. Thanks, Jill. Okay, Jivan, over to you.
Yeah.
So you said early on, right when we started, you weren't thinking of being an artist when you went to college.
Yep. No. I had a full ride in science and bachelor in grad school. So I graduated with a Master of Science degree in environmental policy, and I painted parallel to that during college because I liked art and wanted to develop my skills for some reason. It interested me. But yeah, my career after school, I painted a little bit in New York, and I was doing like figurative work, interior people in rooms and spaces, stuff like that. And then came out to New Mexico and started consulting in environmental policy, doing reports, and then taught with the University of New Mexico at Taos Pueblo, doing a bridge program on sustainability studies and stuff like that, among a variety of other consulting jobs in science. And I painted sort of occasionally on the side for that sort of 4-year chunk, and then started a program called the Project for Art and the Environment because my students at Taos Pueblo were particularly visually inclined, and I started wondering how I could take sort of the creative process as a route into understanding complexity, particularly like if you're drawing from life, the using that process as a basis for thinking about how you look at the world and you think you're looking at a door, but it's never a door. It's when you draw it on a paper, it's something symbolized, and you have to translate all this information, and a door is never the same, and white is never white, and all these things that you assume you know about what you see in the world kind of break down when you try to understand them deeply through drawing or painting, if you're doing something in color. And that kind of was a seed for thinking about, well, what about other complex systems and how we understand that? And that led to a couple of years of curriculum and teaching with the university in Taos Pueblo. During that time, I started wanting to paint again and had a dream telling me I could do it if I wanted to. So I decided, okay, I'll listen to my dream. And from there, yeah, I started building a portfolio and developing a skill set to work outside, which was I started getting tired of painting interiors, and the manner I learned to paint in school was essential for what I do today, but was not liberating physically. It was very sort of intense, direct observation, days and days and days and days and days and weeks on end to do smallish paintings that it ended up just being my body hurt and it was too tense. And so New Mexico kind of was the seed of moving outdoors, and landscape opened up a big physicality. Going back to why I paint large, the freedom of movement is an important piece for me to enjoy doing it, and I think that joy is part of the ultimate goal to convey through the work.
Wow. Thank you all. Okay, so every time I do these, I'm like, I've got another 3.5 hours of questions. Okay, I'm not going to do that to you. But one final question for everybody. Do you have any questions or comments for your fellow panelists? And anybody else out there, if you have last questions, let me know. And I just want to say, Michael Smith, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. He says I'm doing a great job and drawing out, a lot of not only what your process is, but the why. So thank you so much, everybody. Oh yeah, I think it's a great way to spend a Thursday too. Thank you, everybody. Oh my goodness, hello from France. That was really interesting to hear all of you. All right, hello from France, wonderful. Panelists, any final thoughts, questions for each other?
Good. I just wanted to say thank you, Rose, and Jivan, it's really nice to meet you, and David, it's great to see you, and mostly thank you, Rose, for doing this for all of us and all of our patrons.
Yeah, nice to meet you too, Jill, and yes, of course, Rose, thank you so much. This is really fun. It's fun to see into both of David and Jill, your studios, and Jill, I really got a kick out of seeing the sketches of the outcroppings, and totally can feel what you're talking about seeing, the relationship of the rock and the buffalo and whatnot. It was fun to see that. And David, as usual, it's a pleasure to see what you're up to. And yeah, that deer painting, I really like that one, man. I like all of them, but it's unusual for me to like a deer painting, and I like that one. So yay for you, man.
Crowd. Well, thank you. No, and I really want to echo that too. Just thank you, Rose, and your whole team for putting this together. I know it's a huge effort, and it means a lot that you would come into our studios and want to talk about our work and want to understand all these strange thoughts that we have. So thank you.
Well, you know what? That's a good point, David, because it's really funny that, and I appreciate you, everybody who's attending these talks and listening in, because what I really wanted to do, and you wouldn't know this, but in putting together these talks, a lot of artists contacted me, and a number of them were like, is this something I absolutely have to do? Because I just don't want to, I just don't feel like I can talk about it. I don't feel, and so we have all but 2 artists out of 75 who are able to do the talk and to get on a Zoom. And so this has been really wonderful. And what I love is that it's a really safe place that we can all talk and be inside your studio. And the people who are attending, thank you all. These wonderful comments, lovely. These sessions have been terrific. Love the artists are not bashful with color. Want to say hi to my son-in-law, David, from Kate. So what, really, everyone who's attending, thank you so much. So please, to see the work, go to CoorsWesternArt.com, and you can see in many cases multiple images, and like David was saying, some more up close shots of pieces. I'm really glad you came to the talk, because Jivan and Jill in particular, I really needed people to see you standing with the work to get that size. I mean, it's really fantastic. And I hope whoever buys that tree gets a little sketch with dimensions on how to hang it, right?
Oh yeah, they got a whole lot of love for me for helping get in their place.
Good. And so go to CoorsWesternArt.com and you can see all the paintings. On December 18th, the auction is going to open. It's a silent auction for absolutely everything. It was the fairest way to do it. So December 18th, everything is going to be on hand bid, and you can go there and start bidding. You can go there and you can like things and then just keep an eye on and get some little pings if there's any activity on it. The auction aspect of the show will culminate on January 5th. We're going to have some fun videos. We're going to announce all the award winners, best of show, artist choice, things like that on January 5th. And the auction part will close at 8 p.m. Mountain Time. And then the show will be open, buy it now, anything that doesn't sell through the end of January, through the end of what would be stock show. So all that information is on CoorsWesternArt.com website. So again, Jivan, David, Jill, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.